When my brother Jake tossed his napkin in my face and laughed loud enough to draw stares from the other tables, I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I'd already started the countdown. I mean, come on, Jake bellowed, gesturing at me like I was part of the floor show. Who graduates with honors, then decides slinging hash at a diner is a valid career move? Did you lose a bet or something? The table erupted in laughter. My mother covered her mouth, trying to act like she disapproved. My dad didn't even bother. He grinned, leaned back in his chair, and sipped his wine like I was some off-brand sitcom rerun. I wiped my cheek with a paper napkin. The one Jake had flung at me had ketchup on it. You always had such potential, Mom said. But I guess some people just get comfortable. Isn't that right, sweetheart? That word, comfortable, was their favorite code for failure. They used it often, with pitying eyes and half-hearted pats on the hand. I'd invited them here as a peace gesture. My treat. Jake had rolled his eyes when I said, my treat, probably imagining I meant on my meager waiter salary. I didn't correct him. I never did. Let them think I was still living in that studio apartment above the laundromat. Let them believe the rusted-out Corolla in the parking lot was mine. It made what was coming all the more satisfying. Jake was the golden child. Ivy League MBA, corner office at a boutique real estate firm, beach house in Rockport. Our parents always saw him as the pinnacle of achievement. His name was said with pride, mine with concern. When I got laid off during the recession, I moved back home briefly. That's when the tough love started. Jake told me I needed to grow up. Dad said I was too soft. Mom worried aloud that I'd end up as one of those weird uncles who smells like old coffee. They all laughed. I didn't. Even when I moved out again and started doing consulting work, quietly, under the radar, they still treated me like I was some sad, broken thing they had to drag along. That's the thing about people like them. They don't see you unless you play their game. Suit, tie, mortgage, country club. If you don't broadcast your wins the way they understand, they assume you have none. Jake snapped his fingers at our waitress. Hey, could you bring my little brother a juice box? Something simple, not too hard to spill. More laughter. Even the waitress winced. I looked across the table, took in their smug faces, their practiced condescension, their champagne arrogance. It was all so rehearsed. So predictable. And then Jake leaned in. Just curious, man, he said, voice low. Do you ever, wake up and wonder where you went wrong? I didn't flinch. No, I said, smiling. I know exactly where I went right. He blinked, but only for a second. They kept laughing. I kept smiling. Because I already owned the land his beach house sat on. The ink had dried yesterday. He just didn't know it yet. I wasn't always good at hiding. As a kid, I wore my heart like a shirt 2 sizes too big, clumsy, obvious, and easy to tug on. Jake figured that out early. He'd poke at me until I cried, then call me sensitive in front of our parents. They'd sigh like I was exhausting them. By high school, I stopped reacting. I learned that silence was a shield, that if I stopped giving them an emotional return on their abuse, they got bored. I survived on detachment. College was my first taste of distance. I majored in finance, Jake's shadow looming in every class. He was 4 years older. Already the legend professors name dropped when they talked about successful alumni. I tried not to care. I graduated with honors, but nobody came to my ceremony. They were on vacation in Maui. Jake's wife had planned it months ago. After graduation, I took the first job I could, an analyst role at a mid-sized real estate firm. I was eager, stupid, and working 80-hour weeks for a boss who thought I was invisible. I lived off vending machine snacks and burnout. Jake called once, just to ask how long I planned to play office intern. I snapped after 3 years. Walked out one Tuesday morning with nothing but a laptop, a bitter coffee addiction, and a vague idea of building something for myself. Everyone thought I'd crashed. Maybe I did, for a minute. But hitting rock bottom gave me leverage. I started freelancing. Small investors needed spreadsheets built, portfolios audited, market data translated into strategy. I was fast, cheap, and discreet. Word spread. My client list grew. So did my rates. By 30, I was flipping commercial properties and advising mid-tier developers. I kept my name out of deals on purpose, used LLCs, partners, quiet arrangements. I didn't want recognition. I wanted insulation. The diner job started as a joke. One of my oldest friends bought the place and asked if I wanted to come play normal a few days a week. I liked the rhythm of it, the simplicity, the anonymity. I liked being invisible again. It reminded me how little people actually saw. Jake came in once, months ago, for breakfast with a colleague. He didn't even recognize me at first. When he did, his laugh echoed off the tile walls. He tipped me $2 on a $60 tab. I kept the receipt. He was still that same smug bastard, only with deeper pockets and a louder voice. But I'd changed. When I learned that Jake owned a second home in a coastal neighborhood a developer friend had been eyeing for rezoning, my mind started working. Quietly, carefully, I called my friend. That strip you're circling? The one with the outdated septic systems and crumbling seawalls. I asked. Yeah. Why? Buy it. I'll bring the capital. We drew up papers. I formed a new entity. Jake's name popped up on one of the parcels. Bingo. That was the first domino. The rest would fall over the next few weeks. I didn't want to destroy him. Not at first. I just wanted him to feel it, to finally know what it was like to be small, dismissed, underestimated, like I had for years. But the more I pulled at the strings of his life, the more I realized something. He wasn't untouchable. He was just lucky I hadn't tried sooner. 2 weeks after that dinner, Jake showed up at the diner again, this time with his wife and their kids. His tone was smug, but he looked tired. He didn't recognize the hostess I'd planted there, one of my employees moonlighting for the fun of it. She seated them by the window, then came to the back and gave me the signal. I wasn't working that day. I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him from behind the swinging door. His kids were glued to their phones, his wife scrolling through Zillow listings like it was a slot machine. He looked anxious. I knew why. The rezoning proposal had just passed phase 1 in the city council. The local paper even ran a piece about coastal redevelopment in his neighborhood. Jake's second home was on the chopping block. He hadn't put it together yet. He didn't know I was the lead silent partner behind the LLC now absorbing parcels like a hungry amoeba. But he would. The day after that, I made another move. Jake's firm had been circling a midtown warehouse project for months, a legacy industrial space in a booming area. They'd finally convinced a hedge fund to back them. I knew because one of my consulting clients used to sit on that fund's board, and old favors still carry weight. I called in one. Is this personal? My client asked, not unkindly. Not exactly, I said, but it is important. He paused, then said, okay, I'll pull the interest. Quietly. By Friday, Jake's firm lost their funding commitment. The sellers panicked and opened negotiations to new bidders. I made a quiet offer through a shell company I'd formed months ago, an offer well above asking. Within 48 hours, I had the property under contract. Jake's firm didn't even make the second round. That Monday, he called our mom. She, of course, called me. I know things haven't always been smooth between you two, she said, as if years of humiliation could be filed under personality differences. But Jake's having a hard time. Maybe you could reach out? Be the bigger person? I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Instead, I said, sure, Mom. I'll check in on him. The next day, I bought out a small PR firm that handled branding for real estate portfolios. They had a long-standing client, Jake's company. I didn't cancel their contract. I just redirected it. Their team would now be building out my personal real estate brand for the first time. Until now, I'd stayed in the shadows. But the reveal was coming. And when it did, I wanted the spotlight aimed just right. A few days later, I got a text from a contact at an industry trade journal. Heard you're behind the Coastal Revival Project. Big news. Want a feature? I replied with a single word, yes. I told them to publish after the closing date, when Jake could no longer maneuver out, sell, or refinance. When all the exits had been sealed, I'd played my role as the failure long enough. It was time for Jake, and the rest of them, to meet the real me. Jake must have felt it before he saw it. That's how pressure works, slow at first, like a crack in a windshield spreading spider legs across your vision. By the time you register it, it's already too late. It started with the city's planning board. At first, they'd been cooperative about his firm's Rockport zoning dispute. But suddenly, they were cold. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were pushed. His team couldn't figure out why the board's tone had shifted. I could have told them. I'd made a quiet donation to the campaign of a rising city council member. Then another, bigger one. All legal. All very public, if you knew where to look. His firm needed that rezoning approval to push forward a waterfront redevelopment contract. Without it, the project stalled. And if it stalled, the private equity backers pulled out. They were already getting jumpy after the warehouse deal imploded. Jake was starting to sweat. I knew because he called me. That, in itself, was historic. Hey, he said, voice oddly flat. Got a minute? Sure. He coughed, clearly uncomfortable. You still do freelance consulting, right? I do some, yeah. Pause. We've hit a few snags. Some delays in rezoning, and Capital reshuffling. I thought maybe you'd heard something. You always had your ear to the ground with these smaller developers. I almost laughed. I don't know, I said. Seems like things are changing fast. Hard to keep up. You got anything going on? That's when I gave him just a sliver. There's something. Out by the coast. Might make the trade soon. He didn't speak for 5 full seconds. Then, okay. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. He hung up. No apology. No humility. Just vague panic cloaked in business speak. Perfect. The article dropped the following Monday. Front page of the real estate section. Mystery developer acquires majority stake in Rockport redevelopment zone. They published my name in the second paragraph. My face in the third. A full feature on how I'd built a quiet empire. Strategic. Deliberate. Calculated. I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't need to. The next morning, my father called. You're in the paper, he said, voice clipped. I noticed. Is it real? Very. Long pause. Then, as if tasting something sour, he said, why didn't you ever tell us? Because you never asked. I let the silence stretch before ending the call. Later that afternoon, I walked into a high-profile real estate conference at the Four Seasons. Press badges, champagne flutes, and egos polished to a mirror shine. Jake was there. He turned and saw me, dressed sharp, flanked by 2 developers who'd been chasing me for months. His face froze. I walked over, extended a hand. Hey, big brother. He shook it, slowly. You've been busy. Just getting started. The circle of people around us widened. Jake's colleagues looked back and forth between us, whispering. One even nudged another and mouthed, that's his brother? Jake tried to laugh, but it didn't reach his eyes. This whole time, you've been playing poor. No, I said. You just never looked close enough to see otherwise. Then I leaned in, low enough so only he could hear. And now you can't look away. The fallout began faster than I expected. By the time the conference ended, Jake's phone must have been lit up like a dying star. I could see it in his eyes, rapid blinking, clenched jaw, the way he pulled his phone from his jacket and turned it over without looking at the screen. He didn't want to see what was coming through. I'd made sure his partners knew. Not directly, of course. But I gave an exclusive interview to a podcast Jake's CEO loved, where I casually dropped a few details about my latest acquisitions and new moves that had interesting overlaps with past competitors. I never named him. I didn't need to. Within 72 hours, Jake's firm held an emergency partner meeting. He was asked to re-express his involvement in the Rockport redevelopment failure. The numbers weren't good. Investors pulled their commitments, citing internal instability and market unpredictability. The same day, the city council finalized the transfer of the last parcel in Rockport to my holding company. Jake's beach house sat dead center in a cluster marked for demolition and rebuild. The value of the home dropped by nearly 40% overnight. Jake called again. Please don't do this. His voice cracked on the second word. It was the first time I'd ever heard him sound small. I'm not doing anything, I said calm. The market moves where the market moves. You think this is payback? For what? For teasing you? I laughed. Is that what you call it? Teasing? He didn't answer. Then he tried a new tactic. Okay, look, I get it. You made your point. You're successful. You win. But don't let mom and dad get hurt in the crossfire. Oh, there it was. Our parents had, on Jake's advice, moved a chunk of their retirement fund into a private equity project Jake's firm had been managing, the one tied to the coastal property that just collapsed. They'd lose at least 35%, maybe more, when it all unraveled. He thought that might guilt me into backing off. Instead, I said, you shouldn't have risked their money. I didn't know. You were careless, I said cold. Just like you were with me. He went quiet. I added, tell them the truth. All of it. And tell them I'm not coming to bail anyone out. That weekend, I got the call I'd been expecting. My mother, tears barely hidden beneath a thin veil of control. How could you let this happen? She asked. You mean to Jake? I asked. Or to your portfolio? There was a long silence. Do you hate us? She finally asked. No, I said. But I finally love myself enough not to take your cruelty anymore. She tried to pivot. Told me I was being cruel now. That family was family. No, I said. Family is who shows up when you're bleeding, not the ones holding the knife. Then I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't pour a drink or scream into the void. I just stood there still and free. The silence after that was louder than any scream I'd ever heard from them. No phone calls. No texts. No surprise drop-ins. It was as if they'd all been put on mute. finally forced to sit in the quiet they'd left me in for years. Jake's world didn't crumble all at once. It split in layers. First came the news that the firm's largest client had walked away, someone I'd worked with under an alias through a third-party contact. I never told them to back out. I just gave them the numbers Jake had tried to bury. Numbers that told the truth. He was reckless. He played with other people's money like it was poker chips, bluffing confidence, hoping no one would call it. Someone finally did. Then came the internal audit. One of Jake's own partners called for it. Rumors swirled, bad data management, overpromised returns, failure to disclose market risks. Nothing criminal, just enough to look incompetent, to look weak. He was suspended within a week. And when the press got wind that I was the buyer behind the coastal redevelopment, they ran a follow-up piece. Black sheep billionaire? The family ties behind the Rockport turnaround. They even used that phrase, black sheep. Jake's face wasn't in the article. Mine was. I'd never expected validation. Not really. I didn't need the world to tell me I'd made it. But I'd be lying if I said seeing that headline didn't feel like oxygen after a lifetime underwater. That same afternoon, Dad emailed me. Just a few lines. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I hope you'll consider helping us sort out the investment losses. We could really use your expertise. He signed it, your father. Not love, not dad, just your father. Like a stranger establishing identity. I didn't respond. 3 days later, I pulled into the driveway of the diner. My friend, the owner, stood outside, flipping the sign from open to closed. He saw me and gave a half smile. Got a table for one? Always, he said. But I think you'll want the booth in the back. I slid into the corner booth where I used to eat after long shifts, where I'd calculated cash flows and land acquisition plans on napkins while Jake mocked me from a distance. He brought over a burger and a vanilla shake, my usual. No tie today, he joked. Retired it. We sat there for a minute, in the kind of silence that feels earned. You ever gonna tell them everything? He asked. Why? So they can rewrite the narrative? Pretend they always believed in me? He nodded slowly. So what now? I looked out the window at the street I'd walked 1,000 times. Now I live. No more looking over my shoulder. No more proving anything to anyone. No more hoping someone would see me and finally say, we're proud of you. I was proud of me. That was enough. I didn't attend the next family gathering. It was some kind of anniversary dinner for my parents, held at a local golf club Jake used to brag about. My name was on the guest list, sure, but not my presence. I was invited out of obligation, not hope. There was a time when I would have shown up anyway, desperate to be seen, to prove I still mattered. But not anymore. Instead, I booked a last-minute flight and took off that same weekend. A small cabin up north. No cell service. No noise. Just stillness and wood smoke and the knowledge that, for the first time in my life, I didn't owe anyone anything. When I came back, there were messages. Missed calls. My mother had left a voicemail, her voice tight with what sounded like disappointment, or maybe regret. She said something about the importance of family, then, bizarrely, added that Jake's been struggling lately. I deleted it. Jake sent a text the next day. I guess you made your point. Just don't forget who your family is. I stared at those words for a long time. Who your family is. What a thing to say, after everything. I could have responded. I could have laid it all out. Every slight, every insult, every time they laughed at me while I was silently building the empire they now resented. But there was nothing left to prove. Instead, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to send, just to write. To the people who taught me my worth was conditional. Thank you. Thank you for the years of doubt. The silence. The smirks across the dinner table. Thank you for teaching me exactly what love doesn't look like. You thought you were breaking me. All you did was push me into becoming someone who didn't need you to see him to succeed. I became stronger in the shadows. Smarter in the margins. You called it failure. I called it freedom. You raised a boy who begged for your approval. But he's gone now. The man who remains doesn't beg. He builds. He decides. You don't get access to him just because you share his blood. Love isn't inherited. It's earned. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Then I made a call. There was a nonprofit I'd worked with during my early days, an organization that gave grants to young entrepreneurs with no family backing, no trust funds, no lifelines. I donated enough to fund 5 full scholarships. Set up a mentorship program in my name. No press. No articles. Just action. Later that week, I went back to the diner one last time. Slid into that corner booth with a sense of full circle peace. The owner came over, raised an eyebrow. Back again, just to leave the key, I said, handing it over. It's time. He nodded. Where to? I smiled. Home. Wherever that ends up being. I left the diner and didn't look back. No revenge lasts forever. The fire burns hot, then quiets. What remains isn't the scorched earth. It's the person who walks away from the ashes, lighter than they've ever felt. That person was me, and I was finally free.